Hey everyone, welcome to The Things I Think. Today we're going to talk about marriage. And yes, I have a lot of rainbows on, but no, we're not necessarily talking about gay marriage. I want to talk about marriage in general. Where did marriage come from? Why was it originally put in place? Why is love part of the government? Why does the government have any say in who we love and who we choose to spend the rest of our life with? I'm going to tell you what different websites say the definition of marriage is. The formal union of a man and woman typically recognized by law, by which they become husband and wife. The institution where individuals are joined by marriage. A. The state of being united to a person of the opposite sex as a husband or wife in a consensual and contractual relation recognized by law. Or B. The state of being united to a person of the same sex in a relationship that of a traditional marriage, aka same-sex marriages. The state, condition, or relationship that joins two people recognized by society and or by law. There's one definition that I think covers it all. Now, I'm going to be reading from my computer, so I'm going to look like I'm reading from my computer for a minute, but I love this definition. Any of the diverse forms of interpersonal union established in various parts of the world to form a familial bond that is recognized legally, religiously, or socially, granting the participant partners mutual conjugal rights and responsibilities and including, for example, opposite-sex marriage, same-sex marriage, plural marriage, and arranged marriages. The definition of marriage varies according to different cultures, but its principle, an institution in which interpersonal relationships, usually intimate and sexual, are acknowledged. In some cultures, marriage is recommended or considered to be compulsory before pursuing any sexual activity. When defined broadly, marriage is considered a cultural universal. There have been many different things said and written about marriage. What they all have in common is that they all seem to express some universal, timeless truth, when in fact it's the total opposite of that. Everything down to its purpose, its relationships, and its rights and responsibilities differ depending on social class, culture, and era. Pair bonding and raising of children dates back to the very earliest of humanities. In fact, it was used in the Stone Age as a way of controlling sexual conduct and providing a stable structure for child rearing and the tasks of daily life. With the rise in agricultural societies about 10,000 years ago, marriage was actually a way to help secure rights to land and property, and they then designated their children heirs to that land. As these societies grew larger and more complex, marriage no longer was just a matter between individuals and families. It became an institution. This institution was now governed by religious and civil authorities. So when did people start marrying? The first recorded evidence of marriage, contracts, and ceremonies dates to 4,000 years ago in Mesopotamia. In the ancient world, marriage served primarily as means of preserving powers with kings and other members of ruling class, marrying off daughters and forcing alliances, acquiring lands, and producing legitimate heirs. Even in the lower classes, women had very little say over who they married. The sole purpose of marriage was to produce heirs, as implied by Latin word matrimonium, which is derived from mater, mother. By 2100 BC, it was already really well established. We know this because the earliest surviving written laws of the Mesopotamian era on this thing called Ur-Nammu contained lots of different laws about marriage, from punishments of adultery to the legal status of children born to slaves. Many ancient civilizations allowed some sort of form of multiple or simultaneous marriage. For instance, the ancient Hebrews engaged in polygamy. According to the Bible, King Solomon had 700 wives. The men have taken multiple wives throughout the world, including China, Africa, and American Mormons in the 19th century. Polygamy is really common still among the Muslim world. It's only a recent development that marriage should be a sexually exclusive, romantic union between two people. Until 2 centuries ago, monogamous households were a tiny, tiny portion of the world. Less than a quarter of the world's hundreds of different cultures prohibit polygamy. Now, just because you're allowed to have multiple wives doesn't mean you could do it or could afford it. Most commoners actually could afford 1 or 2 wives. which over time led to monogamy practicing. In the Himalayan mountains, the tables were turned a little bit. Women could have multiple husbands. By a group of brothers marrying one woman, it kept the land from being divided among household every time a new brother got married. Since the ancient world, marriage has evolved from a preservation of power to a personal contract between two equals, seeking love, happiness, and stability. When did the church get involved? In ancient Rome, marriage was a civil affair governed by imperial law. However, in the 5th century, when the empire collapsed, church courts took over and elevated marriage as a holy union. As the church's power grew through the Middle Ages, so did its influence over marriage. In 1215, marriage was declared one of the church's 7 sacraments, alongside with rites such as baptism. It was only in the 16th century that the church decreed that weddings would be performed in public by a priest and before a witness. Now you might have noticed I haven't mentioned the role that love has played in marriage. Well, for most of human history, love played almost no role. Marriage was considered too serious to be matter based on such fragile emotions. Some said that if love could grow out of it, that'd be wonderful. With property and reproduction at stake, they wouldn't risk young love to hold that all into balance. So especially in high class, they would have rulers or families decide who they would be marrying. And even in the lower class, where they did have some bit of a choice, they always went with what was practical. Because back then it wasn't about love. It was about getting by and living day to day. For a long time, love and marriage were once widely regarded as incompatible. Now this might be shocking, but a Roman politician in the 2nd century BC was expelled from Senate for kissing his wife in public. That behavior was condemned as disgraceful. In the European aristocracy, they viewed extramarital affairs as the highest form of romance, untainted by the gritty realities of daily life. And as the late 18th century, a French philosopher wrote, "Any man who was in love with his wife was probably too dull to love another woman." So when did romance enter the picture? In the 17th, 18th century, when Enlightenment thinkers pioneered the idea that life was about the pursuit of happiness. They advocated marrying for love rather than wealth or status. This trend was augmented by the Industrial Revolution and the growth of middle class in the 19th century, which enabled young men to select a spouse for their wedding, regardless of parental approval or not. People began taking control of their love life and demanding the right to end an unhappy marriage union. Divorce became much more of a commonplace. Now let's talk about gay marriage. People act like same-sex marriages are some new recent development. Until the 13th century, male bonding ceremonies were performed in common churches across the Mediterranean. Apart from the couple's gender, these events were almost indistinguishable from other marriages in the era. Although the name for it has changed, same-sex marriages have popped up throughout history. Mesopotamian prayers include blessings for such couples. Native American Two-Spirit individuals had relationships with both sexes. The first recorded same-sex marriage was in Rome, when Emperors Nero and Elagabalus married men in a public setting. These types of same-sex marriages occurred in Christianity until Christianity became official religion of the Roman Empire. There was a law issued in 342 AD by Christian emperors that prohibited same-sex marriage in ancient Rome and ordered that those who were in a same-sex marriage at the time were executed. However, some of those practices, aka same-sex marriages, did survive in the Christian era, such as brother making, or even an actual marriage that was recorded in a small chapel in Spain in 1061. Ancient Assyria said there was nothing wrong with homosexuality between two men. In ancient India, same-sex marriage was more common. For example, there was a princess, Shikadidad, I can't pronounce it, who was married off to another princess by her father, the king. And the history of same-sex marriage goes on and on. Gay people have been around forever, basically. So for those of you who say that same-sex marriage is non-traditional, it's actually very traditional, going back to the ancient times, back to the Roman times. However, here's something a little weird. There was a time when marriage wasn't necessarily having to be between two living people. Ghost marriages were performed in China, where the wife or husband was deceased, to continue family lineages. Some tribes in Sudan maintained similar practices. In the 20th century, marriage dramatically changed. For thousands of years, laws and customs enforced women to be subordinate of their husbands. But as the women's rights movement gained strength in the late 19th, early 20th century, wives slowly began to insist on being regarded as their husband's equal rather than their property. By 1970, marriage laws had become gender neutral. At the same time, the rise of effective contraception fundamentally transformed marriage. Couples could choose how many children they have, and even to not have children at all if they chose. If they were unhappy, they could divorce, and nearly half of all couples did. Suddenly, marriage has become primarily a personal contract between two equals, seeking love, stability, and happiness. This new definition opened so many doors to the gays and lesbians claiming the rights to be married too. Opponents of gay marriage are correct when they say that traditional marriage has been destroyed. For better or for worse, it has already been destroyed. Except that began long before anyone ever dreamed of the concept of gay marriage and legalizing it. I hope you enjoyed and learned almost as much as I did. Thanks for watching. Bye.